It was one of those late summer evenings when the air felt thick like honey, and the sky hung low heavy with the heat of everything unsaid. And as the bus sighed to a stop on Route 9, he stepped in his shirt clinging to his back, his breath shallow, his eyes searching for something, though he wasn't sure what, until he saw her. She sat near the rear, her figure outlined against the fading light pouring through the dusty window. Her dress a shade of deep wine that seemed to drink the sun. Her legs crossed her hand lazily, playing with the strap of her purse, and when her eyes met his, he forgot how to walk, how to breathe, how to think. She didn't smile, not yet, but her gaze lingered just long enough to burn into him, and he moved as if pulled by a thread, finding the seat across from hers, though half the bus was empty, and the silence between them was not awkward. It was electric. The wheels rolled forward, the engine grumbled like a beast with a secret, and the bus shuddered as it picked up speed, and he felt every bump as if it traveled through her eyes into his chest, his limbs, his pulse. She adjusted her position, her knee brushing the edge of the seat, and her dress shifted slightly, revealing more of her thigh, and he tried not to look, but looking felt inevitable, like gravity, like the way the moon pulls the tide, and something in him began to ache, not just with desire, but with something older, something deeper. He thought maybe she was older than him, not by much, but enough to make her seem like a mystery wrapped in velvet, like a story told in whispers and shadows. And as the streetlights flickered past her face, he saw the glint of something mischievous in her eyes. "You're staring," she said softly. And though there were no words before that moment, her voice felt like a continuation of the silence, as if it had always been there, just waiting to be heard. "Sorry," he said, and she tilted her head slightly, her lips curving not into a smile, but into something far more dangerous. "Don't be," she said, and turned her eyes back to the window, but not before he saw the heat behind them. Not before he saw that maybe she had been waiting too. The bus turned sharply, and she shifted her weight again, her leg now touching his knee lightly, and neither of them moved, and time stretched into something elastic and unreal. "I've seen you before," she said after a moment, "maybe 2, maybe 10. I think you take this route often, yeah?" He replied, "Every Friday, after my shift at the bookstore books," she said, her voice wrapping around the word like silk. He nodded, watching her fingers as they played with the silver ring on her thumb, and he wondered what her hands would feel like tracing words along his spine, writing poetry on his skin. "What kind of books?" she asked, and he shrugged. "Fiction, mostly the kind where people lose themselves and find things they didn't know they were missing." Her lips parted just slightly, and she leaned forward, her arm brushing his, and the scent of her hit him like a wave. Something floral but smoky, like jasmine and dusk. "Sounds like you like to disappear," she murmured. "Only when it's worth it," he said, and her eyes met his again this time. Not just looking, but inviting. The bus passed under a bridge, and shadows fell across her face, but he could still see the curve of her cheek, the line of her jaw, the way her breath moved through her. "I'm Alia," she said, and her name felt like a spell, a name you whisper when no one else is listening. "Callum," he said, and suddenly the space between them didn't feel like distance. It felt like potential, like a spark waiting for oxygen. She reached into her bag and pulled out a book, worn and soft at the edges, and handed it to him without a word, and he took it, feeling the warmth from her hands still clinging to the cover. It was a book of poetry, underlined in places with little notes in the margins, and he read the first few lines without even noticing his lips moving, and when he looked up, she was watching him again with that same fire behind her calm. "Read it to me," she said, and leaned back, her eyes half closed as the bus swayed gently. And he did. He read until the words felt like water, until they weren't just on the page, but in the air, around them, flowing through the space they shared. And when the engine sputtered and the bus jerked slightly, she leaned closer, her shoulder against his, and he felt her breath on his neck. He didn't stop reading. And when her fingers brushed his arm so lightly it could have been an accident, except it wasn't, he turned to her. Then his voice caught in his throat, and she looked at him, not with surprise but with certainty, as if this moment had been written somewhere long before this bus route, long before this evening, and the city outside faded, and all he could see was the lady on Route 9.